guys, let's talk about drums. Today we're going to be talking about how to get good drum sounds from a live drum kit. These principles will work specifically best for drums that are being mic'd inside of a drum tank or a drum enclosure. We have these at all of our campuses that have live drums, and so hopefully this will help you guys out quite a bit. Let's start out by quickly just looking through the plugins that we have on each channel strip. We're going to start out with the kick drum, and the two plugins that I'm using on the kick drum are the Expander Gate Dynamic 3 and the Waves CLA 3A plugin. So with both of these plugins, we have created some presets for you guys that are in the Highlands Audio preset folder. So we're just going to quickly recall the kick preset for the gate, and we're going to recall the kick preset on the CLA 3A. Next, we're going to go back to that Expander Gate plugin, and we're going to make sure that on this particular plugin that the key source here in the middle of the screen is selected as the kick drum, because this is the channel that the kick that this particular gate plugin is inserted on. This allows the plugin to look specifically at the input source of the kick drum. All right, so let's quickly listen to this kick drum all by itself. So right now, we are hearing simply kick drum and what the plugins are doing for us. Actually, now we are hearing exactly what the kick drum is sounding like with an expander gate on it and a CLA 3A plugin. Let's go ahead and just turn those off quickly. It'll give you an idea of what it sounds like without them. So we're going to flip over to the gate and we're going to turn it off. See how you can kind of now hear the whole drum kit, not just the kick drum. You can hear cymbals, snare drum, just a bunch of noise in the background. And then if we flip over to the CLA 3A plugin, and I'm going to be controlling this plugin from this insert section on the middle of the console. When this insert mode button is flashing, it just means that these rotary knobs in the middle of the console are controlling whatever plugin is selected on the screen. So we're going to go ahead and just take the peak reduction away. And now you can hear that the kick drum without anything on it is pretty noisy. It's got a lot of thwacky mid-range to it. So let's go ahead and just turn that peak reduction or threshold on this compressor up to the point where we're getting somewhere around 5 dB of gain reduction. It tightens it up, it thickens up the low mid a little bit, just warms the kick drum up. It sounds pretty nice. Alright, so let's pop back to that gate and let's turn it on. So that like almost automatically just takes away all of the background noise. Sounds pretty darn good. Let's mess with the threshold a little bit on that gate. So if I open the threshold all the way up, you can hear it kind of like opening and closing. It sounds real funny, really weird. And we're just going to slowly close it until we're getting just kick drum. All right, that's sounding pretty good to me. Let's jump over to the channel strip now and mess with some EQ. Now I've already predetermined some frequencies in this particular kick drum that sound funny or that overpower the room when it comes to sub energy. But let's go ahead and listen to those. I've got them zeroed out right now. First off, we're going to go ahead and grab some low mids. So we're going to boost this guy. See how that's just kind of like thwacky, mid-rangey. It just sounds kind of bad. Let's pull that out. Automatically, the kick drum starts feeling a little bit snugger and has a little bit more tight punch to it. Now this next band of EQ just really rumbles in this particular room. And like I said before, that every room is slightly different, every kick drum slightly different. Your mic placement on drums is going to very much affect the sound that you're getting from the kick drum. So that's probably your first thing to check. So we're going to move this around a little bit. And that's rumbling pretty good in the room. So we're going to go ahead and take some of that out. And then I'm going to boost some low end down here. At Highlands, we want to make sure that the kick drum isn't hitting you in the chest. We don't want to feel like the kick drum is pounding our chests or giving us like a lot of like feel energy in the hard attacky kind of a sense. But rather we want the kick drum to feel big and pillowy, kind of soft and like airy. And so we're going to get that kind of sub energy from somewhere down around 40, 42, 43. So that's why I'm boosting a little bit of that. What do we got here? On this particular kick drum, it's 42. That feels right in this room. All right, so the kick's feeling pretty good. Up top, there's kind of this pingy, basketball-y kind of like sound. Let's listen for that and try to find it with this high band of EQ. See if we can get rid of it. Okay, I think that's pretty much it right there. Let's take that out. All right, that's much better. All right, now let's pop back over to the CLA 3A compressor. And again, we want somewhere around 5 dB of gain reduction. Now that we've EQ'd it, we're getting slightly less gain reduction. So let's go ahead and just turn up that peak reduction knob, which is also a threshold knob. And we're going to get a little bit more control on the kick drum there. All right, that's feeling pretty good to me. All right, so that's the foundation of our drums. Let's move on to the snare drum. So on the snare drum, again, the two plugins that we're using are this expander gate and this CLA 3A once again. You're going to get real familiar with this CLA 3A. It's one of my favorite compressors in the live environment. All right, so we're going to recall our presets. Again, we're going to go to the Highlands audio preset folder, and we're going to recall our snare preset. So let's, and then let's pop over to the CLA 3A, and we're also going to recall the snare preset there. So as we turn that snare drum up, let's go ahead and mute off the kick drum for a moment. So that's the snare drum all by itself with no EQ. Now I do have a slight high pass filter on the snare drum right around 100, and that just takes away some of the low end rumble. But we're going to pop over to our gate, and you can notice that I'm not getting all the ghost notes on the snare drum at the moment from this snare top mic. But I'm totally fine with that because I'm going to get all of that fun stuff from the snare bottom mic that I don't gate at all. So we're going to gate this guy off nice and hard so that it's just popping through. I'm getting nice solid hits. Nothing else really. And on this CLA3A, I'm going to adjust the peak reduction so that I'm getting about 5 dB of gain reduction. Now quickly, I'm going to go ahead and back the peak reduction all the way down, and I'm going to turn the gate off. This is without any compression or any gating. Again, just like the kick drum, you can see that there's so much noise in the background. Alright, so let's turn that gate back on. Alright, cleaned it up instantly. That's really nice. Alright, so we're going to pop over to that compressor. As you can hear right now, the snare is very like tinty sounding and not very thick and full. We're just going to turn up the peak reduction on that compressor, get about 5 dB of gain reduction. Alright, so now that we're there, let's pop over to the snare EQ. Again, like I said, the snare EQ is completely flat. Let's start by getting rid of some low mids. I've already predetermined frequencies that don't work on this particular snare drum, but let's go ahead and listen to what those are sounding like and feeling like. Okay, so that is very kind of like knocky sounding. So let's go ahead and pull some of that out. Let's move to the next one. That's like, it's a little ringy, it's a little like clacky, it just doesn't sound good. It's not what I want my snare to sound like. Alright, so instantly that snare is sounding pretty darn good. Let's go ahead and boost a little bit to give a little bit of snap and clarity in the high end. Usually I find my snap somewhere between 5K and 8K. Seems to work pretty good for me. Alright, so that's sounding pretty good. Alright, this low band EQ, depending on the snare drum and depending on the drummer, I'll use it in different ways. If I've got a really ringy snare drum, I'm probably going to use this low band EQ to try to get rid of some of that ring. I'm going to go really tight on the Q, and I'm going to sweep it. So you can hear that if I really boost that frequency, there's a little bit of ring. But truthfully, this snare drum sounds pretty darn good. It doesn't have a lot of low ring in it. So if it had ring, I would try to just get rid of it, something like this. But because this snare drum is pretty good sounding, pretty tight in the low end, I'm going to actually go back down to about 100 Hertz, and I'm going to boost quite a bit. And that just adds some nice thickness and warmth to my snare drum. Alright. Let's pop over to the snare bottom mic really quick. Alright, on the snare bottom, I'm actually not using any plugins, but I am going to use the channel strip compressor. So let's go over to our Highlands Audio preset folder, and we're going to click on the snare preset. Then we're going to go ahead and turn that compressor on. And this is a really aggressive compressor. It's got a pretty fast attack and a really fast release. And every time the snare hits, I'm getting about 9 dB of gain reduction, give or take a little bit. And the purpose for this is I want to get the initial snare hit out of the way, and I want to just hear all of the ghost notes and snares come through. So I'm getting my initial snap and crack from the top mic, and I'm getting everything else from the bottom. Alright, now that I've got that compressing nicely, let's go ahead and listen to it and EQ it a little bit. All right, so again, there's that mid-range kind of woody, clacky sound in the middle, right at about 1K. See, that's just not good. So let's get rid of that. Almost instantly, we've got a nice snare bottom sound, but let's add a little top up near 10K. All right, and let's add that in with our snare mic that we've already worked on. That's pretty nice. All right, so now let's move forward on our snare and put some effects on our snare. I've got two separate reverbs for the snare one. One's kind of a short room verb and one's a longer plate verb, and those are already set up on auxes 1 and 2. So we're gonna go to the snare bottom. Initially, that's where I'm going to add all of my effect. So let's go to the snare bottom and start adding in a little bit of that drum long verb. See how that instantly just gave it some life, some nice life? Let's add in a little short verb. All right, that's pretty nice. Let's go over to the snare top. We're going to do the same thing, just add in a little bit of long verb and a little bit of short verb. All right, that's sounding like a snare drum. Let's listen to that with the kick drum. All right, that's feeling pretty good. All right, let's go back to the snare top. And let's go to that CLA 3A compressor. Make sure we're getting somewhere around 5 dB of gain reduction, which we are. And then we're going to pop back to that snare bottom mic and make sure we're getting around 9 dB of gain reduction, which we are. So that's looking great. Next, we're going to move on to the hi-hat. So initially, I'm just going to push my high-pass filter all the way up. It's going to be at 500 Hertz. There's nothing really in that low range that I want coming through my hi-hat mic. Next, I'm going to recall that hi-hat preset on the compressor of the channel strip in the Highlands Audio preset folder. And if you notice, in this particular portion of the song, the hi-hat's not really being played a lot, but every once in a while there's an accent note on the hi-hat. It's coming up here in just a moment, and you'll see a little bit of gain reduction on the hi-hat when that comes around. You don't want a lot, maybe 3, 4, 5 dB of gain reduction, just enough to control it. All right, now let's get over to the EQ. Usually there's some low mids. Like I said, on a lot of the previous portions of the drum kit, I've kind of already predetermined what needs to be taken out of, but let me walk you through what I'm listening for. On the hi-hat, I want to make sure that there's not any kind of low mid, kind of like woofy stuff going on. So I'm going to clear out some of that, somewhere around 600 Hertz. I'm also going to listen for that kind of woody, clacky sound because I am getting some snare drum through the hi-hat mic. So I want to make sure I'm not getting that 1K clack from the snare drum through my hi-hat mic. So you can hear it right there. See, there we go. See how much that can affect the sound of the snare drum? 1K in the hi-hat. And now out. That's nice. All right, and then usually on the hi-hat there's something between 3K and 6K that's pretty nasty. On this particular drum kit, I've found that it's somewhere around 4.6. And then I'm going to add a little bit of top, somewhere around 12K, something like that. Just enough to give it a little bit of shimmer and sheen. So Let's listen really quick as the hi-hat comes around. All right, here we go. See, that was nice. That was really nice. All right, and I'm going to also add on the hi-hat just a little bit of the drum long verb to kind of sustain some of the hits on the hi-hat, smooth them out a little bit. All right, so it's coming around again. Let's listen to it with a little bit of reverb. Yeah, that was very nice. All right. Let's move on to the tom. I'm actually just going to give you an overview on one tom because the principles can be just duplicated straight across each of the toms. So on the tom, the only preset that we're going to be using is it's an expander gate. Again, we want to make sure that the key source is selected to tom 1 because we're going to be working on tom 1 at the moment. We're going to also go into our Highlands audio preset folder and we're going to recall our tom preset. So without the gate on, the tom is going to pick up a lot of ambient noise. Let's listen to that really quick. Okay, so that's just the tom mic picking up a bunch of the kit. And we don't want any of that. So we're going to turn that gate back on. All right, that cleaned it up pretty good. All right, so we just found a little portion of this particular song where the tom is being hit quite a bit. This will allow me to show you exactly what I'm talking about. So let's listen to this really quick here. Okay, so right now, that gate's doing its job. Let's listen to it without the gate. See how there's so much background noise? So let's turn that gate on. All right, that's pretty nice. It's cleaning it up quite a bit. All right, let's pop over to the EQ. And just a note, I don't ever use compression on toms. For some reason, compression just seems to mess up toms in a live environment. I want the toms to feel really natural, and it just helps to only use a gate and no compression. So now let's EQ it a little bit. I'm going to go ahead and push this tom up quite a bit so we can hear it. All right. So really quickly, let's get rid of some of that low mid. There's a lot of ooh, ooh. So on this particular tom, I've determined that it's pretty much right there. It's usually somewhere between 200 and 600. On this particular tom, it's at about 330. All right, so now that we've taken out that low mid frequency, the tom already instantly sounds a lot better to me. So this is without that low mid taken out of. See how it's kind of boingy and clacky? There we go. All right, and next we're going to address a room node that's really sustaining in the room here. Like I said before, every room is different, every tom is different, the way that every drummer hits the drums is different. So just got to keep that in mind, but you might be able to hear a little bit. This is kind of a low mid boomy resonant frequency in this particular tom, so we're going to take a little bit of that out, and then we're going to go down here somewhere around 60, 70, 80, and we're going to add a little bit of low end to just kind of give the tom a little bit of thickness. You'll also notice that right here I've got my high pass filter on at 43 Hertz, and it's just simply because I don't want my toms to feel as big and low-end heavy as I do my kick drum. And I'm boosting right around 40, 43 Hertz on my kick drum. Therefore, I don't want that frequency range to be messed with when it comes to my toms. So I'm just filtering out a little bit of that low end. All right, next thing is there's this kind of clacky, slappy sound that sounds a little bit like I'm bouncing a basketball on a concrete floor. So let's find that with the high frequency. So somewhere around there. So let's pull that out. Oh, that's much better. All right, so now let's add a little bit of drum verb to this guy. So here's a little bit of long drum verb. And it actually all by itself doesn't sound very good, but when we get it in the mix, it'll sound really nice. It'll make all the individual portions of the drums feel like one cohesive drum kit. Now a little bit of drum short verb. All right, now let's listen to it in context. I'm going to leave this tom up on top of the mix quite a bit. All right, so let's settle that tom in the mix just a little bit. All right, that sounds nice. And just for reference, I've done exactly the same process with tom 2. You can hear it right now in the mix in the stereo image there. And that sounds pretty nice. All right, so next let's mess with the overhead mics. So just like the hi-hats, I really don't want any low-end frequencies coming through my overhead mic. So initially I'm just going to high-pass filter right up to 500 Hertz. All right, now that I've got the overheads high-pass filtered up to 500 Hertz, I'm going to use the channel strip compressor, and I'm going to go into our Highlands Audio preset folder, and I'm going to recall our overheads preset. Then I'm going to turn the compressor on. And if you'll look and see, the threshold is pretty low. It's -30. And so let's listen to that really quick now, in context with the rest of the drum kit. So already it sounds pretty good. But if you notice, my attack and my release on my compressor is up 100%. It's fast attack and fast release. The knee is at 0, and I've got about a 10 dB or a 10-to-1 ratio. All right, so basically what I'm doing with this is every time the snare drum is being hit, I want that compressor to pull the snare drum out of the way about 9 or 10 dB. What that does for me is it leaves the cymbals to be heard, leaves the close mic on the snare drum to be heard, but gets the snare out of the cymbal mics, out of the overhead mics. So let's listen to that without the compressor. See how the snare drum gets really roomy sounding and really distant sounding? Now let's turn that compressor back on. Instantly, the snare drum gets tight and controlled, and that's what we want. All right, so now let's EQ a little bit. I'm going to boost some of this low-mid frequency here down in the 600, 700, 800 Hertz range. You can see how it's really kind of like muddy and washy. Let's get rid of some of that. All right. Now, the cymbals get a little harsh in certain frequencies, and I've already predetermined that on this particular drum kit, I've got a couple of frequencies. One is around 2.5 K, but let's sweep that around a little bit and see what we're hearing. Yeah, somewhere around 2.5. Let's pull a little bit of that out. And Then also up here around 4, 5K. Yeah, 4.2 on this particular kit. Let's pull some of that out. That sounded nice. And let's boost a little bit of high end, maybe 13, 14. Give a little shimmer to the cymbals. All right, that's feeling pretty nice. Let's add a little bit of drum long verb to the overheads. Give a little sustain, a little smoothening. All right, that feels pretty good. So that's our drum kit as a whole. That feels pretty great to me. I hope you're liking what you're hearing. Let's go ahead and slowly unmute the rest of the band and listen to what it sounds like in context. So here's drums and bass. We'll add in a little bit of acoustic guitar and a little bit of the electric guitars. And the keys and synths. Let's listen to that drum kit in context just a little bit more. I'm going to add in the vocals as well. Alright guys, those drums sound pretty good to me, and hopefully they do to you as well. To just give you a little bit of context on where we want our drums sitting in the mix here at Highlands, we want to make sure that our drums are very clear and punchy and dynamic and tonally controlled, but we want to make sure that that our drums are not overpowering. We want to make sure that they're not overpowering the musical, melodic elements to the songs, and we definitely want to make sure that they're not overpowering the vocals. So hopefully these tips give you what you need. We really just want to resource you guys well. Thanks so much for serving. We just love having you on the team. Y'all are amazing. Have a great one.